What's up, guys? Welcome to a Roaring podcast from Roaring.io, where we talk to some of the best in tech and product management. My name is Jesper Kask, and I'm your host. In this episode, we're joined by Fredrik Riiser, who's the commercial manager at fast-growing Norwegian company Strise, who provide a platform for simplified decision-making. We talk about the problems of fragmented information, using data and AI to make smarter decisions, and what it means to have a cohesive 360 view of your customer. Enjoy. Okay, so welcome Fredrik Riiser, commercial manager at Strise. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be invited.
So let's dive straight into it. We've introduced Strise previously in the podcast, but tell us a little bit about the story about the company.
Absolutely. So I'm not one of the founders. It's Marit Rødvan, Patrik Skjennum, and Sigve Søråsen who founded the company, and that was approximately 5 years ago now. What it started out as was a research project up at the Norwegian school at NTNU, where they were looking into using graph technology and natural language processing, NLP, to create structured data out of unstructured data. So there's a vast amount of data floating around in the world on the internet now, and how do we as a company make use of that? So that's what we've been able to do at Strise.
Okay, and how does that? You mentioned sort of a data structure process that sort of was the beginning of everything, but what does your product look like today, and what's your solution?
It's a great question. Today we have a Strise platform where our end users log in to solve their business problems regarding information that they need to get based on. It could be anything from onboarding a customer, so close to AML, KYC, know your customer, but it's also on prospecting new opportunities, so growing the company using AI technology from the graph structure to provide a solution that automates that for you. Today we have big banks that we're working with. We also have other companies in the financial sector that uses our platform as basically a hub to make decisions, and that's what we aim to do as well. We want to create a interface where people can log in and they can get connected insights for a smarter workflow to make decisions better and collaborate across their organization. Okay,
and in a lot of companies we talk to, business processes related to customers and customer information. They're usually conducted manually through several different systems and platforms and tools. And you've sort of, from what you tell me now, you've sort of gone in the opposite direction, gathering all of these different processes of decision making into a single platform. Why is that?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. What we've seen and what we see is that there's tons and tons of legacy systems. Where there's been individual projects and systems that's been created to take care of one individual problem at a time. And this creates data silos. And the legacy systems that we see 10, 20 years old systems, the biggest single problem with them is that they don't connect, they don't talk to each other. And what we believe is that if you have a system that your company can use and that everybody is able to log into to get a single source of truth, you'll be then able to have a compounded value of, you'll get the compounded value of each decision that goes into the system. As an example, say that me as a salesperson would find a new opportunity using the Strise platform. Now, in a traditional system, I might be working just solely on that customer. I might be following up, hopefully being able to get a deal close with them. But it might be that I need to then export that data and send that to another system where someone else works to screen them for any risk signals, saying maybe there's been bankruptcies attached to them. Maybe there's some data regarding their adverse media on some trades with blacklisted countries from the FAT blacklisted, or as you you provide the PEPs and sanctions register, that they are actually a political exposed person. Now, that all would take a lot of time, and there's no transparency between these systems. But what we're able to provide using Strise and using a platform that's allowing both parts of the organization to be working together is the insight, the connected insights. So a salesperson making a decision to go after a sales prospect, and then for anybody working with AML, compliance, credit, ESG, being able to then look at that prospect and say, well, actually, this is a flag for us. We can't pursue this opportunity, or the other way around. We can pursue this opportunity, and we need you to double down on that. So there's a compounded value that happens as soon as people work together in one system.
Yeah, and then you also get a sort of a cohesive view of the customer profile, I guess, which isn't spread across systems and looks different in every system. But you have the same information for everyone to see, which must be a huge upside for customers as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So a 360 view of the client or the customer, we see that as a buzzword spread across the internet, and most likely it's very fragmented system still. But what we've been able to do with the Strise platform is that we have almost 200,000 different sources that we connect real-time data and cross-reference towards. And what happens is the second that you have all that data connected into one place, you're able to do analytics on that. And you're able to not just provide the data, but you are able to provide the connected insights as well. And what I mean by connected insights is that we would then be able to say that this is a person, and the network of that person has a associated universal beneficial owner that is, again, blacklisted in another country, or they've gone bankrupt 10 times, which would be very hard and time consuming to find if you were to just Google search or use traditional system to look up each and every single individual. Most likely you wouldn't be able to find each individual, and it would, if you were able to find that, take a lot of time just to connect those insights. But having the network model, the graph structure that our data model is based on, you're able to not just look at the single entity, which is the company or the person that you're looking at. You're actually able to see their entire network and what sort of the growth and risk signals associated with that as well.
And if we go back a little bit and just you sort of describe yourself as a decision-making platform, or maybe a decision-making simplifier of sorts. What's the problem or issue with the way everyday decisions are made today in companies? Because a lot of these decisions are made on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think the single biggest problem is that information is fragmented. There's simply put, there's not access for everyone to see all the information. Even if you work in the same organization, oftentimes there's different logins to different teams. So that's one part of it. And the second part is that having fragmented information spread across the internet as well means that it would take both skill and time to be able to find and consolidate all the information to make a proper analysis to say, yeah, this is the decision I want to make based on the holistic view of the company and its network. And we believe that good decisions, it starts with a good foundation of knowledge. And that I think holds true both in personal and professional lives as well. The more you know about a certain product or a certain individual or a company, the better informed you are, the better decisions you'll make regarding any sort of actions you need to take towards that individual or product as well.
For sure. And what is, if you just take us through the basics of the data that you currently provide in your platform, what kind of data from internal and external sources do you use, and how is it used?
Yes, so we used our natural language processing to be able to take what we call unstructured data and turn it into structured data. This allows us to reduce noise because we're then able to take an entity, again, which would be the person or the company, and make sure that what we provide associated with that entity is actually regarding that person or the network. Now, this sounds pretty trivial for us humans because we would be able to, for example, read a newspaper and see that a company name was mentioned. But if you look at this from a computer perspective, it's really hard for them to segment out that it's actually talking about a company and not something else if the name is the same. So an example would be apple and apple. Say that you have the fruit and you have the company. Now you need, as a human being, it's very simple to see that it's the apple, the company, and this is pears, bananas, apples.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But using the contextual data, using the natural language processing, we're actually able to then make sure that this is the contextual data. This is an article mentioning both Apple company and the late Steve Jobs, for example. So we know that this is talking about the company. And on the other side, we could see that this is talking about or mentioning Bama, the company, and then the fruit, and then segment the two into two different buckets and say, this is associated with the entity you care about, and this is associated with something else, and get that away from your news feed or get that away from any sort of adverse media that you're able to find in Strise. So media is one big part of what we provide. So news, events, everything that's covered by the media. But there's also correspondences. There's also announcements. So say that the classic company intelligence that you'd find from any sort of traditional lookup search tool, you'd find that in Strise as well. But what we're able to provide on top of this is a layering of contextual intelligence that gives you more of an insight. And so this is where, for example, your data is very, very valuable for us, because what we're able to do then is go out and search for who is the expert, who's really providing the best data aggregated on this specific topic. So say, for example, for PEPs and sanctions that you provide, we are then able to put that into our platform. And what you end up with is a contextual view, which has tons of expert data aggregators, making sure that what we're able to provide on the contextual insights on the business intelligence side and the company profile that we provide in Strise is the best of the very best. So that's basically what we aim to achieve, is that we have news, we have announcements, we have ESG, we have PEPs and sanctions, we have the data that you need to do sales, we have the data that you need to onboard, and we're continuously adding sources as well as the regulatory scene changes and needs changes from a strategic business perspective.
Mm. And obviously, you mentioned the crucial part that data plays in decision making, and data quality is sort of the key there, isn't it? If the data quality is low, the data isn't worth a lot. Actually, it's probably more harmful than beneficial.
Absolutely.
And how do you ensure data quality in the solutions that you provide, and in what way?
Yeah, so going back to my former point, I think this is where having a platform structure like Strise is what sets us apart. We're able to segment out that this is actually the entity that you care about, the person and the company, but we're also able to segment out that the providers that we choose to deliver the data onto the Strise platform is the best of the very best. So as an example there, we know that for Scandinavian companies looking for PEPs and sanctions, there's tons of providers, but most of them have an international perspective where they've really not taken into account good enough the regulatory scenery that entails sort of being a business in Scandinavia. Meanwhile, for example, as again, Roaring provides, is the best of the very best on that aspect. So then we're able to pick and choose and see that, well, this is actually the best provider to solve this very specific problem. And we take great pride in understanding sort of the limitations that data has in Strise as well, because at the end of the day, we're a time-saving workflow tool where people log in to save time, make better decisions, collaborate, and solve their everyday problems. And if we're then providing data that's lackluster, that's not good enough, that's actually increasing increasing work rather than increasing risk, increasing the time spent. Then we're not filling sort of what we're aiming to achieve.
And what are the biggest challenges you've encountered so far in trying to digitize and automate sort of the daily business decision-making processes?
That's a great question. I think there's still a lot of companies who want to build their own solutions to solve problems that occurs. So instead of looking into sort of experts on the field and acquiring a third-party solution to solve very specific problems and help the company grow and help the company get more digitalized, they are still looking to solve it themselves by either using consultants or having an in-house team developing. Now, there's tons of examples that go the other way around as well, which obviously is a big opportunity for us, and where we see that this is the companies that's most likely to prosper in the near future as well, because the technology it increases in complexity. It gets harder and harder to develop in-house, and you need to maintain the infrastructure that's associated with it as well. So I think, to answer your question, that the biggest challenge is just making sure that we have a good enough story as to why go with our solution, why not build this in-house. I feel like we've finally gotten to that point, basically based on case studies and examples of companies that's gone down the route to utilize Strise as a platform and see the results they are getting from using us, and then being able to provide that in case studies and say, this is not hard to copy. This is something that we can provide to you as well. But it would be very hard to copy the technology by trying to build this yourself.
And what kind of response have you been getting from the customers that are using Strise in terms of improved quality of the process or improved comfort of the process, knowing that you have the correct data at the right time and time saved? What are you hearing from customers?
I think if I start off with 3 different examples, one is on sort of the sales module in Strise, where we're able to use the AI technology to basically run through your customer list today and look at tens and thousands of data points and have the AI learn from your interactions and recommend you new prospects. We've seen then results being that sales managers sending us messages saying, this is revolutionizing. Usually I've been buying lists from this provider where we'd have to just run through the list chronologically.
Yeah, that's a common one.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really manual, and it's also very repetitive, and it doesn't really have the compounded value of the initial decision that you make, saying that, well, I know say for example, company number 3, I know that isn't a good prospect for us. Now, this would then live in my head if I were the sales manager, but using Strise, I'd be able to X out that company. And as the market evolves and new companies come along and so forth, this is actually taken into account. And it would then all of a sudden, when you show up at work, you'd get a recommended prospect because based on all your interactions. So this is an example of processes that's been around for tens of years, where you bought lists and you just run through the list chronologically, to where with the Strise platform, we've heard that, we tested it. We usually had like 5 prospects on our team that we identified through the entire process like this. And now we've gotten 136 prospects in 1 week. Now, obviously, that's a really extreme example, but it's a real case, and that's So that's very much on the sales side as to how we automate prospecting and better that aspects of growing your business. But on the AML side, we've gotten results from big banks saying that we've been able to save 3/4, 75% of the time onboarding a corporate customer, and this is obviously a significant time reduction. And what this allows the companies to do, the big banks to do as well, is grow faster, because the biggest bottleneck they have today in terms of expanding their market is the time onboarding. We've seen examples where it takes 2 to 3 months to onboard a corporate customer. Now imagine saving 3/4 of that. Obviously that's a lot of more customers that you're able to then onboard in 1 month.
Yeah, business performance just skyrockets from that, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It really does. So that's very significant. And then I think the last example that I want to mention is just being able to have this system work across different departments. To use onboarding as an example again, we've seen then that the compliance officers would be able to look at what the AML team is doing in the onboarding session. And traditionally, they've been very reactive, in certain instances at least, where they've been very reactive because it's not been a standardized way. The reports have been that they've gotten. And there's been different systems, and it's been very much like looking at it from an email with an attachment, and then running through that, and then sending an email back, having questions. Meanwhile, everybody working in the same system, saving the report, which is automated in Strise. The compliance officer could very quickly go in and see this is the actual data that was provided on the time of the risk assessment. And all of a sudden, you take away a huge part of sort of the interaction between those two departments, which in essence is very much not necessary at all, because what we really care about is the results. Was this a proper onboarding? Did the risk assessment make sense? If not, then this is the reason why, and you're able to communicate that as well using the collaboration features.
That's great. And in your opinion, if you start to sort of look ahead into the future, what does the future hold for digital decision making, or decision making in general, and especially if we have the sort of the scope of AI and those kind of technologies? What would you say?
Yeah, that's again a really good question. Now, I think that we're on the verge of being able to utilize AI to the point where we're able to be extremely quick, but still reactive. Now, what I mean by that is that we've not reached a point where we're able to use predictive analytics good enough to prescribe sort of the strategy moving forward. We're moving now from a time where everything was extremely reactive, very slow, because just gathering the information in the first place and flagging what had just happened would take too much time. Now we're at the point where we're able to almost instantly tell you this has changed. And this is the flags associated with it. And this is probably the action that you, based on your organization and your sort of action points, should take. But I think that looking at what is in the near future is taking that one step further. It's about looking into the big data that is provided on both risk and growth, and seeing that, well, we actually see that a number of your customer within this portfolio seem to have problems in year number 3 within this industry. What we suggest as that would be predictive analytics, and then the prescriptive would then be the system giving you a suggestion, telling you that we suggest that after 2.5 years, you sit down with the client, you make a plan to make sure they don't fall into the same problems as their peers are usually facing in that time period. Now, that's just one example, and there's tons of interesting and great examples on this and experiments that can be done. So that's sort of where I think that we're heading moving forward, using AI to prescribe both strategies and action points.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting future to follow, given the advancement of technology and the speed of the advancement for everyone. And if you sort of were to give an organization or a company a couple of pointers where to begin in trying to optimize their business processes and their decision making related to the business processes, what would you pick out of your magician's hat?
Yeah, that, again, a really good question. I think understanding whether we are facing growth or risk as the biggest sort of bottleneck in terms of where we're trying to go. I definitely think that if you're able to identify whether it is growth or whether it is risk, you're more clearly able to set the strategy moving forward as to where your next sort of technology venture should lie as well. And then identifying the bottlenecks that exists already, and making sure that you don't double down on some sunk cost fallacy on halfway done sort of integration projects from a time that's gone. Making sure that you set the modern standard of having systems that set out to help you collaborate and solve problems in the way that you would do in your everyday normal life. Because what we see is that technology is changing, and the way companies will procure technology moving forward as well will be much more similar to sort of the way that we procure technology as consumers today. And if we look at sort of the work environment and how that's changed over the last 5 to 10 years, we see the new generation of decision makers who is now actually approaching their first or second job, and they're starting to make impact, and they are the future. They are the ones that will be making the decisions. And if you don't facilitate a technological revolution / change based on your internal systems to facilitate what they want to see, what systems they want to operate in, then you're losing out. So if I were to give one pointer to big enterprises, it's start having a strategic focus on the user interface of the systems they do acquire, because the young professionals now arriving to the work or arriving at work, they have expectations. They're impatient. They're more impatient that they've ever been before. They don't like slow systems. If they see a system that, do I really need to download this, copy paste it, and send it to the person on the desk next to me so that he can just give it a thumbs up, then they're losing out, and this is a huge problem for them. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a major focus that companies really need to be aware of, that if they are to attract talent, and talent will define who will be the prospering companies moving forward, then that's a focus area.
Yeah. And I think going back in our discussion earlier on, I think you sort of need you mentioned the need for quality data as a sort of a foundation for the decision making, which can be provided in several different ways, obviously. But and then you need a sort of a slice of digitization or automation just to speed up the process, and finally cross-system and collaboration cohesion, so that you know that you have the same data available for everyone, and that you can collaborate and work simultaneously. Absolutely.
So I think that from a product perspective, there's 3 pillars that you need to be aware of as a company. The first is that you need user adoption, and that's very much on the collaborative end. That's very much where you're able to provide a new solution to an end user, and the end user say that, this is better than what we've had before. I'd appreciate if I'm allowed to work in this system moving forward. But usually that is just that's just for a time being, because new systems will always come along. So what you need to do as a second part of that is to have a top-down anchoring strategy, where you're able to not only satisfy the end users, but you're also able to satisfy the managers and the board in terms of the strategy moving forward. Is this a technology that will actually be implemented in our policies and our training? So say that a new employee comes in, then your technology and your platform is one of the first things they get trained to do stuff in. And it's not a nice to have, it's required that you do it through this, because we want to reach our business goals, and our policy then dictates that this is the best way to do it, and our employees should be trained in using this platform. And then number 3 would be infrastructure. And infrastructure means basically how do you integrate to create seamless workflows. It could be through APIs, such as the way a lot of, I know, roaring systems are set up and that you are facilitating for. But it could also be that it's bring your own data, where the company that you are delivering the service to are able to provide parts of their data into your system and end up using your system as the main hub as well. And I believe that for a good product company that's modern, you need to have at least 2 out of those 3. So either you have that you are extremely user-centric. We as Strise, we believe we are very user-centric. And you could be then, for example, attached to the entire infrastructure to the company. Or it could be that you are user-centric and you become a part of the policy. Because if you're just one of these, then it's most likely very easy to replace you with something else. And nobody want to be in a position where they're easy to be replaced. And that's obvious from a commercial standpoint, but it's also extremely important in terms of the conversations you're having with the client or the customer, because the second you become something they rely on, it's it's much easier to continue to develop, to provide them what they need moving forward as well, because the conversation will be much more revolving. How do we solve this instead of
and a constant feedback loop, hopefully, as well.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great. And in terms of Strise and your platform, you mentioned some of the business processes that you've already digitized and sort of tried to automate as far as it goes, in terms of customer onboarding and prospecting and the KYC, AML regulatory compliance issues, for example. What's the next process you're looking at to try and improve Strise as a platform?
Yeah, no, I think doubling down on what we've already been able to achieve. A huge focus for us this quarter is to double down on sort of the monitoring aspect of using Strise for KYC. What I mean by that is that we see that we're able to provide real-time value in terms of the flags that we have in Strise to say that a new beneficial owner has just been added to the company structure. Adverse media, this flag tells me that this company has some risky news. So we're able to provide you with this. But what we're focusing on now is actually taking that monitoring aspect and delivering a real-time service that will flag companies in internal systems that's outside of the Strise platform as well. So that's very much on the AML side. And then we're also looking into ESG, how we see that there's a huge regulatory change there as well. We see that it's becoming a big focus area for both enterprises and smaller companies. And it's a really important sort of position to take from a sustainability factor as well. And we want to be technology that works for a better future for everyone, both users and the users' customers and their portfolio. And we think that we're able to provide something very unique using the graph technology and attaching the ESG data to that. So definitely focusing on that moving forward this year.
Sounds awesome. And what is the if you were to sort of have do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, not really. It's just I want to thank you for allowing us to join in on the podcast. We love the work that you guys are doing, and I think that we have a really good collaboration going on in terms of in terms of the PEPs and sanctions data and all the other data that you guys are providing. So I'm just trying to think out loud now if there's anything that we haven't been able to really dabble into. And I think for this episode, no, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Fredrik. The pleasure is all ours. Really enjoyed having you on, and thanks a lot. And I'll talk to you soon.
I'll talk to you soon, Bye.